So what happens when you can no longer afford the payments on your car? What are your options and what can you do about it? I'm Joe Chavarria and we're going to unpack that today.
Disclaimer: I'm not a lawyer, and this should not be considered legal advice. One should seek appropriate counsel for one's own scenario. Please note, this video is directed towards viewers in the United States. If you are concluding business outside the United States, we highly encourage one to find and understand obligations regarding one's disclosure.
So realistically, it's a very tough situation to deal with because once you drive off the lot when you first buy that vehicle, it depreciates in value right away. So let's say it was a $20,000 vehicle. 1 week later, it's probably worth like $15,000. And so, and you're financing the original amount. And so if you are at the situation where you can no longer afford the payment, let's say 2, maybe 3 years down the road, you may be upside down to some degree, or you may not really have any equity to where you can just freely sell your vehicle back to the dealership or sell it outright and not have to owe anything. So that's a tough one. We're going to talk about what you can do there. So there's really 2, maybe 3 options here. One option would be to go to a different dealership. You probably still need a car, but maybe you want something a little bit cheaper, with a lower payment. And so, maybe going to another dealership and seeing if you can roll some of that negative equity into a new loan with a new vehicle on a new vehicle, and maybe that'll help lower the payment. Second option, depending on how strong your credit is, it would be very similar to that deal there, but instead of going into a new auto loan or a new purchase scenario, you would go into a lease. So you would roll some of that negative equity into the lease. Why I like this option a little bit better if you can do it is because when your lease is over, that negative equity is gone. When you're in a purchase scenario, if you decide, if the same thing happens in this transaction again, to where 2 or 3 years, you're like, I don't really want this vehicle, I can't afford it, I need to get another vehicle, you're gonna probably still have some negative equity because remember, you carried some negative equity from the other transaction, and then this vehicle depreciates in value too, it always happens. And so it kind of could make the problem a little bit bigger or just prolong the scenario. That's why leasing, getting rid of that negative equity in a leasing scenario may be a better option for you. Third option, which again, kind of not much of an option, I know for some people maybe it is to basically sell the vehicle and whatever negative equity you have, basically, just pay off what you owe, and see what you can work out there with the bank. And so therefore you can kind of walk away from it, preserve your credit as much as you possibly can and not have any, negative debt following you for months and years to come. Now, a common scenario that sometimes get people in trouble is, they will essentially give that vehicle or loan that vehicle to a family friend or just a friend, and they'll take over the payments. And this is a good idea in theory. However, in practice, there's some obstacles you may run into, such as that person, again, it's not really their vehicle technically, so they don't really have any skin in the game. And so they may run into a scenario where they're not going to be that motivated to pay on time. And then you kind of take a friendship into a scenario where it's like, hey, you're kind of screwing me over a little bit because you're not paying it on time, you're hurting my credit, you're not giving the cash so I can pay it. Then it kind of gets a little awkward. So again, good idea in theory, but in practice, it doesn't always work out perfectly. So I just wanted to share that. So really, if you're really wanting to get out of the payments or just take a break from it and just kind of dial things back a little bit because the car is pretty expensive, see if you can get it sold to another dealership, to a private party if you have maybe some equity into it, or maybe the negative equity is not too much and you can kind of deal with that and work out the balance with the bank. Let's say that you can sell the car for 16 grand and you owe about 17 grand on it, then that little difference, $1,000 difference, maybe you can make smaller monthly payments to the bank with that or pay it off, and that way you don't having to worry about having payments for a longer period of time. You can kind of get rid of it and deal with the remaining balance at that point. Again, you can also go back to a different dealership, try to get a smaller vehicle, maybe downsize, Try to get something newer. That way the interest rate will be lower. So like newer and cheaper, if that's a possibility. So your interest rate will be lower, your payment could be lower, and it'll be easier to absorb that negative equity into that new account.
So what happens if I want to return the car? Do I get a refund?
It's actually a good question, and I've never been asked that, so that's a good question. So unfortunately, no. All the money you've paid towards that loan or towards that agreement is non-refundable. So if you decide 2-3 years later you don't want that vehicle, you maybe just want to give it back to the dealership, say, hey, I'm kind of done with it, I'm tired of it, the payments are too high, or the vehicle kind of sucks, whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, there's not a scenario where the bank or the dealership is going to say, okay, well, since you don't want it, here's the money back. And main reason is because of the terms that are agreed to, prior to taking that vehicle off the car lot. And so like I said before, there's a bank in the transaction that is going to receive X amount of dollars over X amount of time. Your monthly payment's broken down between principal and interest. And so your interest payment, that's interest already applied towards the loan. And the bank, all that principal payment has been applied towards bringing down that balance. So whatever you agreed to, the bank's already, going to get that money one way or the other. And so, when you decide you want to give that vehicle back or you don't want it anymore, that money does not come back to you. That money is well spent and well gone, because the bank already took that money and you're not getting that money back. The bank wins in that transaction. Even if you stop paying, the bank still kind of wins. We'll talk about that in another video. But unfortunately, again, to repeat it, all that money is gone. Okay guys, if you enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up. I really do appreciate that. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Any questions related to this topic, drop them in the comments section below. Again, I'm Joe Chavarria. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.